Richard, Radio Richard.
I have to ask you about your own personal contact with the different artists, because in my experience, sometimes I have a really direct contact with the artist, and you can really get into how they're feeling and have a relationship. And sometimes you just show up at the studio and do the record and leave. So I'm sure everybody wants to hear you talk a little bit about your work with Prince.
I moved here in 1988. I knew there was a Prince in town, and I knew several players from my big band that would call last minute because they were returning with Prince that I need to get subs for. So that was my relationship to that music. I completely missed the boat. I didn't know anything about his music, and we just lived a parallel life. When Claire Fisher passed away, shortly after that, he did all the string arranging for him.
Right.
Mike Nelson, that is the band leader and arranger for the Hornheads, was a friend of mine and one of the players that I collaborated with over the years, forwarded me a text that Prince sent him looking for a string arranger to keep the Fisher legacy. And I'm going,
Yes.
Why are you calling me? I mean, these are huge shoes. And he says, I called you because I think you can do it. And that's how it started. I mean, months went by without hearing anything. And one day a track showed up in my text, so he said, did you hear it? I said, yeah. Can we go in the studio on Monday? And I had to rearrange my life and make it work. And that's how it started.
Nice.
The first couple sessions were at Paisley Park, which I didn't even know at the time that Prince was actually living there. So when I got instructions like, don't go to this area, I thought, okay, somebody's micromanaging musicians, but I needed a place to set down my parts and make a couple revisions. So I'm going to find a flat surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I wandered around, found a flat surface somewhere, started working, and I see a silhouette of somebody very familiar coming towards me, and that was Prince. And he says, excuse me? I said, yeah, I'm sorry, am I sitting wrong? Are you looking for a place to work? I said, yeah, let me show you an office. And I introduced myself. He took me to an office, and those are the words I exchanged with him. Then I did the couple sessions at Paisley.
Right.
He got really, really excited about working with strings because it's the first time that he was actually present in one of those sessions.
Right.
Once he was present, he wanted strings on everything. So we were working on so many different songs, but it started pretty late. It was 2013 when we started working with him, and he passed in 2016.
Yes.
2 months after the last track we recorded for him.
Wow. Well, I've loved his music since the very first record he ever did, which was brought over to England, sort of under somebody's, have you heard this thing? And there's very, very little interviews with him. When they are, I really value them because you get a little bit of an insight into how brilliant he was and how it seemed to me that he was always choosing his words very carefully. Some interviews, he didn't say anything because he thought the person interviewing him was an idiot, and you can tell that. But sometimes he was very, very articulate. Tell me something about how you, not as a musician, but just as a guy to talk to, how you would describe his personality.
Well, again, I've seen him once. Actually, I've seen him twice, but he was present in one of the sessions.
Yes.
I was in the room with the strings, and he was in the booth. And only when we finished the session with the strings and we recorded harp, I was in the booth, realizing that he took so much joy of that session.
Yes.
That session took place when the Minnesota Orchestra was on a strike for 14 months, and it was really devastating for a lot of these musicians. And the fact that we were able to use a lot of these players for these sessions, we were blessed, and they were happy to do the work. But Prince was very, very vocal about using live musicians and how much he loved working with live musicians and string in particular. And that was the moment that he basically declared that he's going to hire us a lot. So
how did your relationship with Bacharach come about?
again, you know, sometimes you meet one person that takes what you do serious and opens a lot of doors. I mentioned Michael Baker earlier. Michael was Whitney Houston's musical director. He is the guy that invited me to work with Aretha Franklin, and that was a more continuous relationship. In 2009, Michael produced a record. I don't know exactly what the relationship was, but Burt Bacharach wrote several tunes for an artist in Italy. And he wrote one string arrangement and didn't have time to do couple other. It was actually strings and couple French horns, I remember. Michael gave him my phone number. It was the most beautiful 2 weeks because we had a lot of interactions and kind of calling each other, asking questions. I remember one conversation with Bert where I didn't think much about it, but I heard from Michael later on. Bert asked me, you know, I wrote in that measure C add 9 over E. And I noticed that you changed the chord symbol to C2 over E. To me, it's the same chord. Why did you not use C add 9? I said, well, I'm very traditional in my beliefs in balance and harmony. And to me, C add 9 means C major adding the ninth, right? When you have it over the third, that means that you have the third double. You have it in the chord and you have it in the bass. If you omit the third from the chord and you have it in the bass, the chord will, to me, to my ears, will balance better.
Right.
And he says, hold on one second. He goes to the piano, he plays those two chords and says, I'll be darned, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, this is a phone call, so I couldn't really see. And you know, when we moved on, talked about something else. And then Michael told me, hey, Bert told me that you actually learned something from you, and which is such a
And I gotta say that very thing, it's so great to hear you say that, because I really into that as well. And the reason why I believe that is Herb Pomeroy. Now I don't know what years were you at Berkeley?
I not only studied with her, but I actually got an opportunity to write for his professional band.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Herb said that in one of the classes. He was saying, look, you know, doubling the, I mean, he said it in his own way. He said, doubling the third sounds like crap.
Yeah.
I could talk about Herb Pomeroy forever because taking his classes was just, that was the thing I always tell people. Herb Pomeroy is the guy who made me into a real musician. And I got to study with fantastic people. I mean, you know, they were all just wonderful. And I think, what years were you at Berkeley?
83 to 86.
Well, man, that's why, because, you know, you were there a lot. I was there 71 to 75. And what I love about something you said earlier about, you know, that when you had started, you had some very set ideas about what's right and wrong. When I was studying with Herb, you know, I was writing like crazy, and he never told us to write in a style or in a specific, he just said, use these techniques correctly. Because, you know, I mean, I took all the line writing classes with and the Duke Ellington courses. He said, just use the techniques, write what you want to write, but do it in a way that is technically hip. And man, it was just so great to have that freedom, and yet the restriction of saying, okay, let's do it this way. So I liked what you said earlier about that.
But to this day, you know, I'm using several guidelines from the line writing in
Oh,
every kind of writing that I do, including string writing.
and just, you know, also the thing about you and I are the kinds of people who, if somebody tells us to show up for a session and the session starts at 10 o'clock, we're there at 9,
Mhm.
you know, and it's done, you know, and, you know, you might have a couple of little things you want to check, but it's done. But that I got from Herb too. Let me ask you about, did you have any personal contact with Whitney?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was an outsider. I was the guy that did the charts, and in 2004, they were doing a tour in Europe with Dionne Warwick and Natalie Cole. And Michael hired me to do the arrangements, and the plan was to have an orchestra in Europe. So I wrote the charts for the band, and then I expanded it with horns and strings. So I was there at the rehearsal, but I was most of the time in a different room doing the writing, and so I wasn't really playing with the band. Something happened, and the orchestra got canceled, and Michael asked me to join as a third keyboard and play a lot of these parts from a third keyboard. So that's when I became part of the group, and my interaction with Whitney was very minimal, but you know, she didn't spend a lot of time with the band. She came to maybe one rehearsal, sometimes sound check, but most of the time it was on stage. Nice conversations and stuff, but I didn't really feel like we were close in any way. It was,
Sure. Sure. Well, that's often the way with big artists, and um, especially, you know, from what I've heard from other people who have worked with her, she was pretty much show up, sing, leave, you
mhm.
know, a lot of times, and a lot of artists are like that. I'm interested in the song "Black Is" that you did,
Mhm.
as Jeremy Lubbock had done the rest of the arrangement. I mean, and so what did you arrange? The rhythm part?
No, actually, I've done a record in town for a singer by the name of Dennis Spears. And Dennis wanted a lot of different configurations, and he had backing and stuff. And I felt like, you know, if I do the arranging, I want to kind of concentrate on the arranging and not be spreading my head too thin and stuff. I brought over Bob Friedman, that was one of my teachers at Berkeley, as a producer. Bob at that time was retired from Berkeley, and his experience was Broadway, and he'd done a lot of different projects. And most of the stuff that Dennis was going to do was covers, and Bob asked about original tunes. I put him in touch with a songwriter friend of mine, and one of the songs that she submitted was Black Is. And when he heard that tune, he said, "We're definitely recording it, that tune." And he took me aside after that, and he says, "Listen, by the way, Bob was Lena Horne's musical director at some point.
Right, right.
So he said, if Lena ever hears that song, it's going to be on our next CD. I have no doubt she's going to snatch that song." I said, "Wow, sounds great." He said, "Well, it doesn't mean that you're going to be doing anything on that, but I'll send her the song." I forgot all about it, but 6 months later, Sherman Sneed, her manager, called me and said, "You know, we got your number from Bob Friedman. You were the one that did the arrangement for the singer." And I said, "Yeah, Lena loved your arrangement, and she wants to use you for arranging that song." So it was one song that I was asked to do for the record.
Right.
Um, I went to the session in New York. Jeremy conducted it, and it was just a blessing to be part of this.
Right. So you arranged it and Jeremy conducted it.
Yeah,
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah,
it
that's
was
great.
it was out of this world, that experience. You know, I was much younger at the time, and felt like, yeah, this.
Right. Right. Well, that would have been certainly again, there's certain musicians who when you're younger you hear and you just think that's way up there, and I'll never have anything to, and Jeremy Lubbock was always more than a hero. He was kind of like some celestial god sitting up in the land of beautiful music, and yet to actually get to meet him and talk to him and hang out with him. I mean, he was just the greatest guy, as you've seen in my interviews with him. But yeah,
Yeah. My experience was that I was so fortunate that I wrote
yeah,
I wrote the arrangement before I knew it was the producer, because I would be so unbelievably intimidated.
yes, 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 yeah,
He's that good. He
yeah,
was
yeah,
fantastic to work
yeah.
with.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm actually grateful that I got to interview him so intimately about what we do and what he does, because it's a fantastic record for musicians of a unique artist, and how he elevated everything that he did above the level of a piece of commercial work to the point of high art, no matter what it was. And also his fantastic enthusiasm for everything. And that's the thing. I mean, people, I'm sure you feel the same way. To be standing in a room full of fantastic musicians and having written some stuff in the dark, lonely room, with little dots, and then to hear this magnificent sound, it's like seeing your newborn baby. It's just a fantastic thing, and he felt that so much, so deeply, and so that was a great thing.
He was also a good defender of his craft, because sometimes in certain project I believe he did more than the calling was,
Yes.
and he insisted in doing that.
What was the most difficult session you've ever had to do?
Oh, no question. Aretha Franklin's first session was so damn happy. It turned out a good story, but it was the most difficult session. Again, I was hired to do the arrangement, and that's all I knew about it. And I got a call from the A&R of Arista Record, and says, "Well, you're supposed to be working on this arrangement." I said, "Yeah, I'm done." Who do I send it to? And he says, "Send it to, you're supposed to put the session together." I said, "Okay, Michael didn't tell me that."
Okay.
Michael was in Italy at the time, and I said, "Let me call him." I called Michael and I said, "They tell me that I'm supposed to put the session together." He says, "Oh yeah, can you?" I said, "Okay, let me make some calls." So I called a contractor in New York and put the session together. I did one interaction with her road band previously, and knew the instrumentation for her road band. And when they sent me the arrangement, I thought that I'm sending it to her musical director for that kind of instrumentation. She wanted strings. I wrote strings and horns. So we get to the session. Michael couldn't make the session. He produced it from Italy via satellite. Aretha was in Detroit. I was in New York.
Oh,
And we're just starting. Apparently she was listening to the process on her phone, and she wanted revisions right away. She changed the intro, and I was so green, I didn't even prep myself to get there with some staff paper. It was like finale copied parts, and that's it.
mm.
And when she wanted revisions, they had to kind of scribble it in the music. I had
Yeah, yeah, I've been there.
30 musicians, and she was asking for certain parts, certain notes, and it was stepping all over what I was doing. We somehow get to the end of the evening, and I'm going, I'm so fired, this is not even funny. And the A&R comes to me and says, "Well, I think it went well." I said, if I leave now with what we just did, I'm gonna throw everything away." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Everything steps on everything else. It doesn't gel at all. What do you suggest?" I said, "I suggest you keep me another day, and we'll just do edit session tomorrow and put it back together." So
Nice.
we did that. And he showed up towards the end of that session. He heard it and he said, "Oh, this is really good. Let me play it for her." And he takes the phone and he plays it over the phone and leaves the room. We continued working for 20 more minutes. Then he comes back and asks me, "Can you go to Detroit tomorrow to mix it with Miss Franklin?" I said, "She doesn't know who I am." And he says, "Well, she knows now." The reason I said that, Michael is the guy that got the call to do the arranging. Michael calls me, and he wasn't even in the session.
Right.
So somehow she had to get the idea that I'm involved in that.
Yeah.
So then I went to New York, to Detroit the next day, and in the process of mixing the session and having the three of us sit next to the console, we got to kind of know each other and exchange phone numbers, and that started a whole extended relationship with phone calls and other arranging that I've done for her for the next 3 years. It ended up really, really good, but the session was a nightmare.
Yeah. No, that's a great story. And just as a matter of interest, was H.B. Barnum not involved at that point?
I thought HB was involved, and I wrote it basically for him.
Yes.
And I thought he was going to be in the session and all that. Apparently,
Right.
she was keeping him just for the live thing.
Right, I see. Yeah. Okay. Now, you're a great player, you're a great writer. Would you like to play us something?
My playing is
Your playing is legendary, right?
no, my playing is supporting stage for my writing. I really never
Yeah,
practice playing and stuff like that, but
that's okay.
I play a little jazz and stuff.
Just have some fun and play us something nice that people will enjoy. And
Okay. Here we are in a jazz gig. What do you want to play? I don't know. What do you want to play? So you call it too.
all the things you are.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Something like that.
Yeah, baby. Well, let's do the gig right here.
All right.
Yeah, we must play sometime. That would be
I would
fun.
love that. I would love
Yeah.
that.
I want to say thank you to Adi for showing up here and telling us wonderful stories and entertaining us with some groovy jazz piano. And I'm so grateful that we got to know each other, and we're going to hang out soon.
I hope so.
Adi Yeshaya, you are the man.
Thank you, Richard. That was great. Thanks.
Radio Richard.